Minister Zhu Hong, distinguished scholars, executives from CGCC member companies, and our friends in the media. Good morning. On behalf of CGCC, it is my distinct honor to welcome every one of you to this very special event. China's economy was ever of double-digit growth. We all knew that it has decreased to a growth rate of about 7%, from an old normal to what most experts have termed the new normal. Since China's government started the go-out strategy, Chinese investment in the United States has grown rapidly, especially over the past 3 years. To properly analyze and evaluate this trend, CGCC has conducted a survey of its Chinese member companies and commissioned a series of position papers with our partners, comprised of top policymakers and experts in the field. Today, we are here to share some of the major findings and conclusions from this work. According to the 2015 survey, reflecting a gradual economic recovery from 2008, 60% of Chinese companies noted that their annual revenue and business activities increased in 2014. 48% of Chinese companies reported growth in market share. Investment in real estate, both commercial and residential, of course, experienced a faster growth during this period. Data shows that in 2015 alone, China invested close to $10 billion in the US real estate market. This is twice as much as that invested in 2014. The real estate sector in 2015 also accounted for more than half of the annual overall Chinese investment in the US. This is all good news. However, the profit margins in the US market for Chinese companies have declined. Unfortunately, and are currently not as attractive as compared to their corporate global average. In 2013, while 25% of the Chinese companies reported that their US profit was lower than their corporate global average. In 2014, its percentage had increased to 39%. Chinese investors consider higher labor costs to be their most significant challenge. Survey respondents' major concerns also include slow economic growth and, in some cases, difficulties in finding qualified workers. In addition, Chinese companies also reported that US laws and regulations can be complicated and cumbersome, posing significant challenges and barriers to Chinese investors. The CGCC white paper has focused on such challenges, hoping to provide investors from both countries, as well as government organizations in China and the US, with a set of practical regulations before and during their investment activities in the US, in order to make sure that they are abreast of any changes and to avoid incurring unnecessary costs at a later stage. Having a US partner that has properly aligned its interests with a Chinese company will likely help address many of these challenges and provide many advantages both in gateway cities and the secondary and tertiary markets in most of any industry. At the present time, China has become a very hot topic in the world. Chinese policies and market activities have been and will continue to be analyzed and discussed thoroughly by industry, government experts, and the media. These market participants do not always understand all of the facts and the dynamics as they relate to China. It is our sincere hope that our survey report and the white paper will provide more information and contact to these players and to companies both in China and the US, in order to stimulate discussion and seek out solutions to challenges that will be mutually beneficial. Finally, we believe that our data and analysis have the potential to be useful to both the Chinese and the US governments as they undertake to negotiate the bilateral investment treaty between our two great economies. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your attendance, and we're also looking forward to our wonderful keynote speech and the panel discussion. Now let's welcome Mr. Zhu Hong, Minister for Commercial Affairs at the Chinese Embassy to the United States, to address you this morning with his words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Xu, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm glad to be here at the China General Chamber of Commerce USA White Paper launching event. We found that outside is very cold, but inside is very warm here. The warm is because we have so many outstanding entrepreneurs and businessmen here. The past 2015 witnessed a successful development of China-US trade and economic relationship. Bilateral trade volume reached over $558 billion. Although world trade is sluggish, China-US trade managed to increase. This shows the strength and resilience of our bilateral relationship. On the investment front, more and more Chinese executives and entrepreneurs are planning to do business in the US. By 2015, there are more than 2,000 Chinese firms settling in the US with a total investment of nearly $60 billion. Wanxiang American Corporation, a wholly owned subsidiary of Wanxiang Group, the largest auto parts maker in China, has very successful example for other Chinese investors doing business here in the US. As a $3.5 billion corporation with a workforce of 13,500 employees across the world, Wanxiang America acquired over 30 US companies during the economic downturn and saved thousands of American jobs in the process. In addition, the company has invested in more than 80 projects in US real estate nationwide since 2010. It should further be noted that Wanxiang America's achievement have had the support from both China and the US government. Wanxiang Group had the opportunity to report their business operation both to Chinese President Xi Jinping and the US Vice President Joe Biden. Wanxiang America's story is the best illustration of the win-win cooperation between China and the US. Wanxiang America's achievement cannot be realized without Mr. Niping's leadership and business insight. As the president of Wanxiang America Corporation, 2 decades ago, he led Wanxiang into the US. Initial investment of only $20,000. Over the years, Wanxiang America has grown into a household name in the US auto industry and the clean energy industry. And Mr. Ni made a name for himself as a trailblazer in the process. Now he is again poised to the front runner in the realm of Chinese foreign investment in the US, taking the American subsidiary he had to the next high level. Now, I would like to invite my new friend, the president of Wanxiang America Corporation, Mr. Niping, to deliver a speech. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Zhu. He just did my job, so I can keep this pretty simple. I wanted to say, echo what you were just talking about. You know, we have warm weather here. I left Chicago last night with a -degree, hoping coming to New York will be much better weather. But last night I was waiting for the taxi. It was awfully cold, you know. But indeed, inside of this room, I do feel much warm. And in fact, you know, we all know that 2016 may not be easy for all of us because of the election year. And by staying together, I think, hopefully, you know, we will have a warm weather too. So today, the subject I was given is talking about the Chinese investment in the United States. And the topic was Chinese investor in USA, partner or competitor? So that was the question. This reminds me when I was in China 20-some years ago. At that time, one of the most famous saying from Chairman Mao was that, who's our friend, who's our enemy? That is the most important question in the revolution. I think a lot of you probably know that as well. And obviously today, you know, we don't have that revolution anymore, but the same principle, I think, applies to the business today as well. And fundamentally, you know, we have to answer the question when we come to the new country to be as an investor. How do we define ourselves? What are we supposed to do? And what are we not going to do? I recall, you know, many years ago, probably 15 years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to a Chinese entrepreneur who came to, I forgot which city, I think, let's just say New York. And, you know, we couldn't meet each other, so we had a phone conversation. So his question was, you know, hey, Wanshang, you guys have been in the United States for, you know, several years. And we want to come to the United States as well, you know, to invest here. So what should we do? So I asked him, I say, you know, I got the 3 questions. If you answer the 3 questions, then we pretty much can tell what you're going to do. The first question was, you know, why you want to come to the United States? And let's just say, you know, he's selling the glass. He's making the glass in China. So his comment was that, you know, I need to be in the market. I need to be with my customer. I'm making the glass in China for, let's say, $1.50. That's my cost. I'm selling for $1.60. I'm making 10 cents. Now, I'm walking around in New York. I find that my glass was sold at about $3 each. So I'm not making any money. But it looks like it's a huge profit here for me to pick it up. So I said, okay, you know, I got it. So the second question is that, is selling the glass a competitive market? I.e., you know, are there a lot of people selling the same kind of product? Then he thought about it. He said, yeah, of course, you know, I walk around, I don't know, the main street here, like Fifth Avenue or whatever. I see a lot of people selling the same glass. I said, okay. Then the third question is, can you do anything better than your competitor? Or, I know from the government point of view it's a bad word, but from business point of view it's an excellent word. Do you have any monopoly power when you sell the glass in New York? Then the phone went silent. After a few seconds, he said, hey, you know, I got it. He said, I'm leaving, I'm going back to China now. So obviously, you know, he's very smart. He has a very good logical business sense. It is very true that if this is a competitive market, if we don't have anything special or unique that we can be different from our competitor, then whatever you can do end up with like everybody else. So even the retail price might be $3, and then maybe they bought at $1.60. It doesn't mean that they have the profit for $1.40. It could very well mean their profit is even less than 10 cents. So he figured out very quickly, say, yes, I mean, that's not my market then. Or at least that's not my strength. The issue actually is that we saw, by talking with the many, especially in the Midwest, a lot of manufacturing companies, the problem is not just about whether you can be competitive. The problem is even worse, because I use us as an example. If we want to make a car in the United States, what am I going to do? I cannot make a car, so I'm going to have to find the people. So I'm going to call GM, I'm going to call Ford, I'm going to call Chrysler, I get their home phone number, I call them at the night, and I'm going to say, hey, can you come to work for Wanxiang? Then the first question will be, what is your name again? And I remember at the beginning, I had to spend a lot of time to convince our customer we're not selling wax, or whatever, because that was the easiest way for people to pick up as our name. And a lot of people say, oh, you're selling waxing, And we tried to say, hey, we're selling universal joint because Wanxiang in Chinese stands for universal. So anyway, so I'm going to have to call them and say, hey, can you guys come to work for Wanxiang? They say, oh, yeah, what's the deal? So, the answer will be, okay, how much you're making? Okay, I'm making $100,000. How about $150,000? Then they say, no, I mean, I'm okay with GM, I got a nice program, I got a pension here, I got everything. Why should I work for a Chinese company, which I don't even know whether you're going to be here tomorrow or not? So we're going to say, okay, everything has a price, right? So we're going to say, okay, how about $200,000? Yeah, I'm going to have to check with my boss. My boss may say it's not good, it's too risky. I have kids going to college, I cannot risk that. But at the end, you can reach the agreement. You can still reach the agreement. And you can still build the same platform as your competitor has today. But the problem is that your cost is going to be at least 100% higher than your competitor. That is the real problem. So if you were to consider yourself as a Chinese company, you have a cost advantage at that time because the labor cost in China was lower. Now when you add the USA piece, very quickly you will find it out on a global basis, you are not really competitive anymore because your advantage, the small advantage you had from the labor cost, have been absorbed by your high overhead in the United States. So on a global basis, you are not competitive anymore. So that's not the best solution, obviously. So that's the reason I told that entrepreneur, I say, you are absolutely right in terms of your business logic. However, your conclusion is wrong. It does not mean we cannot invest in the United States. I say, otherwise, we're kidding ourselves. What are we here for? We're here to do the business, right? So there got to be a way we can find it out to make ourselves successful. That actually comes to the question, that's the reason I say I like the topic today. What we are here for? Are we competitor or are we partner? So first of all, let me be very honest, there's no question at all. Competition is everywhere. In the business, you cannot avoid competition. In fact, in our life, we cannot avoid that. Competition exists between nation to nation. It exists between company to company. It exists between people to people. And when you date your girlfriend, you have a competition. When you were newborn even, you had a competition too. Don't forget, one thing I learned in the United States is, that was an amazing, phrase, crying baby gets more milk. So the competition is just a reality. The problem is that the competition does not help you to expand your frontier. Cooperation does. Competition doesn't solve the problem you might have. Cooperation does. Competition will build the roadblock on the path for your success, but the cooperation could help you to navigate through even in a very difficult environment. So we always say this, the competition is the minus. The cooperation is the plus. So if we cannot avoid the competition, at least let's try to see if we can find a way to cooperate. So really to today's topic, the question was competitor or partner? I would say the answer to that question probably should be competitor and partner. We just need to change one word. If we cannot avoid to compete, let's try to find a way to cooperate. If we have to start, that's our own experience, if we have to start as a competitor, let's try at least do our best to end up with as a partner. And I would say, Minister Zhu talked about 20-some years ago when we started, we only have a very limited budget and, home office, so on and so on. But on the other side, I would say, we have been very lucky because U.S., China are such two great countries that it has huge difference. Not only we have different economic development stage, but also we have very different structure too. So we all know the difference will create the beauty. The difference will give us a huge room to compete each other and that we can still survive. And the difference will give us even more opportunity that we can cooperate with each other and all win at the end. So the question is, what we really should do, try to maximize the value between the USA and China. So I can share, a few things from our own experience. Obviously, everybody's different industry will be very different. I just met 3 insurance company chief executives, so insurance company could be very different from what we have been doing. But just from our own experience, I have a few things I think we probably can share very easily. The first one, probably the most important one, is that let's play by the same rule. Coming from China, obviously, with very different business environment, with very different business mindset, with very different background. I remember when we got here, we were very surprised at that time. USA is more about intangible asset. China was more about a tangible asset. USA was more about the cash flow. China was more about profit. And even the land. I was shocked, USA, the land probably is considered at high risk liability, because if you don't generate cash flow, the land doesn't worth anything. But in China, the land is most valuable asset. So one of the things, we have to recognize that China's the last 30 years, doesn't matter whatever you call them, is about the breaking the law. Because that is the economic reform. Reform means that you have to push the envelope. That's the reason somebody told me, I didn't watch it, the 60 Minutes on Sunday talk about the copyright issue between US and China. And I say, I always have different opinion. Because you cannot ask a country to say, you got to reform, you got to push the envelope, you got to find a way to change your rule. In the meantime, you say, okay, if you violated the rule, then you are bad. You cannot have both at the same time. So coming from the 30 years reform mindset, we probably are more eager to say, hey, what can we do in terms of, push the envelope again? But the problem is that with the rule already established in the United States, we just don't have that luxury. So, our experience is you're going to have to follow the rule, follow the law, then you can start to communicate with your partner. Because otherwise, they're all scared. They don't know what the hell you're doing because you're not following the same rule. So that is a very different fundamental change. And I was asked many times about the CFIUS approval, Even today, they say this probably should be the subject. So oftentimes people say, hey, how do you guys come through with that many CFIUS, approval process? I would say it's not, frankly speaking, that difficult. And my joke is always find a more expensive lawyer. As long as you have a better lawyer, you're going to come through. Because the rule is already being established. As long as you follow the rule, you can communicate with anybody in this country. To me, that's probably the most important, the first one, for us to find a way to work with our partner. The second one, I would say, we need to focus on our strengths. Obviously, coming from China, we're different. That is our value. You're never going to be speaking better English than your competitor in the United States, right? So your strength is speaking the Chinese. So we have to find a way to create our own value. Otherwise, we're just no different than anybody else sitting in the same room. I call that's the disaster for the business because you become a commodity. There's no value. So you got to be able to find a value. But we have to admit, coming from China, there's always two sides of the coin. On one side, you would say, hey, I don't have the heritage, as I said, your costs are going to be higher. I don't have the heritage compared to my competitor. But don't forget that on the opposite side, you don't have liability neither. There's a lot of competitors we have because the historical liability, they're boxed, they couldn't move. Another example is always, we can always complain about the CFIUS approval process, which sometimes does drive us crazy. But let's don't forget on the opposite side, when we have a grand opening or ground break or whatever, the governor shows up or the mayor shows up, they all give you a hug, they talk very nicely, warm. Our competitor, local competitor, probably don't get that treat because they're already here. The government probably pay less attention. So everything comes with a positive side and a negative side. So I would say this, we probably should focus on our strengths instead of complain about a weakness. We do have a lot of strengths. I remember, back 15, 20 years ago, because of the cost difference for the product between USA and China, many companies, when we took it over, they were either in the bankruptcy or liquidation or close to be filing the Chapter 11. We took the company, very easily we can turn them around. All we need is just a good buyer who's very capable to look on a global basis to find a way to reposition this kind of company and help them to reduce the cost. Very powerful. Then come to the 2007, 2008, when we hit a downturn for the US economy. The capital coming from China became critically important. So at that time, I got unions and others, they all very welcomed us to invest because I remember banking law was so difficult that I was told in the 90s, if we want to buy a bank, you would never get approved. You will never get it denied, but not approved either. Just going to be sitting there. And in 2007, 2008, all of a sudden, the mindset is different. Say, hey, if you want to really buy the bank, let's talk about it. And then now, I can use the battery company we bought as an example. It's called A123. And we bought the company in January 2013. 2012, the company lost $300 million. And 2014, the second quarter, we turned the company into positive cash flow. So it's an amazing story. Everybody say, hey, how could you even do that? Obviously, there's a lot of effort. I don't want to, downgrade the effort. But on the other side, I would say the strengths we bring to the table worked very well. And I recall we were in Vice Joe Biden's office in the White House. He was joking. He said, you guys made it. And, looks like the policy is fine. The policy is working. Why? Because far majority of the output out of our Michigan plant today is shipping to China. That's the simplest but the most important fact for us to turn around the company. China market took it off, and it was just a perfect timing for us. So the point is that if we can focus on the strengths, obviously A1, 2, 3, we got punched left and right in the 2012 and 2013 because everybody questioned, challenged. And I remember I talked to a lot of press people, and questions start from, are you stealing the U.S. technology to China? Are you stealing the U.S. taxpayers' money? And all this kind of stuff. But instead, if let's focus on the strengths we have, we can make the company work. In fact, it worked very well. The third one I would say, in our own experience, is let's be transparent. I still believe that transparency is probably the most important way to communicate with your partner. Because we're coming from different countries, because of the different language, a different culture, be transparent is so critical. And I remember in the early, still sometime today, at the early time, I was joking this before, I got a more FBI visit than a customer visit. And they were in our office at least every quarter, okay? And then we have an audit from U.S. Customs, Immigration, IRS, obviously, And many of this. And that helped us, frankly speaking, to learn how do we be transparent. And I always say this, we all make a mistake. Mistake is not an issue in our life. How we handle the mistake is the real issue. As long as you can handle them properly and with transparency, I think we're going to be fine. It's not an issue. So, with all this audit in place, and also, a lot of people ask the question, how do you guys deal with the union? And obviously, we have UAW, one of the most famous unions in the United States. And I'm very glad to say this, before we took over these companies, quite a few of them had a strike or labor dispute. And lucky us, after we took it over so far, I cannot guarantee tomorrow, but so far, we had no labor issue at all. Never had one strike, never had any dispute. The reason, and there's a lot of different reasons, but I think the fundamental reason is that we want to be transparent. We have a policy in our company. Every Christmas, we're going to just talk about what do we have done, and the good and bad, and the people in the warehouse, the people as a janitor, whoever, come to the same room. We're going to talk about what do we have done, what are we going to do next year. The transparency help us reconcile the difference of opinion. And the transparency helped us to become much stronger when we deal with different environment. So I think, this is truly an important asset for us, that now we don't have to worry about anything. I don't care who's coming to audit us, which is okay, they might find the issues, and we will correct them. And if we disagree, we're going to hire a more expensive lawyer to argue with them. It's okay. But that's the way the business is. So the transparency, to me, is a critical piece. And the last one, probably not the least one, is I call this as a compromise. And we all know that, or at least my view is that competition actually, or to compete, is pretty easy. All you needed to do is just to be brave, close your eye, and move. You don't need to care about whatever. But to cooperate is much, much more difficult. Not only you have to be brave, but you got to have wisdom too. Because, I mean, this is our chairman's philosophy as well. He's always saying sharing the money is more important than making money. If you know how to share in the money, you can make the money pretty easy. We have, as Mr. Zhu was talking about, we have more than 100 different pieces of asset or operations in the United States and in the 26 states. I would say 95 or 96% of our operations are all with partners. Only a very few were the greenfield operation we established from greenfield. Working with our partners, I would say we have been pretty lucky. But on the other side, just to learn how to compromise is very, very important. And we actually got a lot of benefit in terms of working together with our partner. If you know how to give a little bit more, because in the business, at the end, the business really at the end is just about a compromising. If you know how to compromise, you're going to move forward. And I always say this, if there's $1 on the table, if I'm selling the product, if I charge you $1 more, that means you're going to have $1 less, and I'm going to have $1 more. Vice versa. But if we look from different angle, if we can work together, then there might be $2 or $3 or more dollars we can create on the table, which you can all share. So, if there's anything I would say, we learned a lesson, or we learned actually from our competitor as well, is to view ourselves not necessarily the solution, especially in today's global economy, but a part of the equation. You're going to be an important factor in the whole equation. Without you, the problem is not going to be solved, but you're not just the solution, because we all have to learn from each other and how to work with each other. So from that point of view, I would say this: the best way to compete in today's global environment, in the past it may not matter, but in today's global environment, the best way to compete or to win the competition is to work with your competitor, make them your partner, and then we can all win together. So that is pretty much, I can share from our own experience, and I'd love to hear your experience too. I'm sure, I don't have a competitor here probably, so you're all partners for sure, and so as I say, this year probably is going to be difficult. So if we can stay together, we can help each other, then let's build a better relationship between U.S. and China, which is going to help all of us. I was told I should stay on the podium for questions, and be happy to answer whatever the question you might have.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jack Freifeld. I'm a reporter with the China Daily USA. One of the things you talked about, first of all, thank you for coming and sharing with us today some of your thoughts about the year ahead and the year that was. One of the things that you talked about in your speech was the concept of transparency, and obviously sometimes it's tough when Chinese companies are coming over to the U.S. and taking over or buying out U.S. companies. I'm curious to hear a little bit about what your operations in Delaware. I know that you guys, after taking over Fisker, you bought an automotive plant in the area in March, or in February, and then in March you bought an automotive plant. You now have a program where you're sending a number of school students from Delaware to China. I'm curious how that plays into the transparency for the company overall. Obviously, you're based in Chicago, so how does that help people in Delaware and elsewhere know a little bit more about the company?
That is indeed a very tough question if you know the background. And first of all, I would like to say this, we really appreciate the government, local government from Delaware. They were very, very helpful during the process when we were bidding for the Fisker asset. Some of you may know the whole story. Fisker is actually Fisker designed the Tesla car, and they end up with a kind of lawsuit. And so these two companies were neck to neck, same business model, same style. The difference is that Tesla has a great leadership Fisker didn't have. So Fisker went under in 2000. They also got a lot of government money, the federal government money. So Fisker went under back in 2013, I think. And I remember the auction was in New York, the same ugly winter, in 2014, I came here. So Fisker had a big operation. And actually, it's not an operation. It's an empty building in Delaware. It's about 3 million square feet. It's an old GM building. And at that time, we were hoping that buying this asset will allow us or give us the room to bring the car back to the United States, because the car was made in Europe. And at this moment, we're not, the Delaware building is being utilized for storage purpose. And we built the first small volume plant in California. The reason for that was simply for the convenience purpose, because we have to launch the car in 2016. So we don't have time to rebuild a plant while the headquarters is on the west, the operation is on the east. It's going to be too risky. So we're going to just start to launch the small volume out of California. Then we will see how the market goes. If the market comes back, if the electrical vehicle, which I still have some question, in terms of comparing to China. Don't quote me wrong. Compared to China, China is taking off like crazy. Here, we're still much slower pace. So our goal is to do whatever we can to support the local community. That's one of the reasons why we were there, and President Xu was there with us, CGCC. We're very honored to work with CGCC. I'm part of CGCC too. We were at the Delaware, now it's not just Wanshan, many of us are all in Delaware working with the governor and to put a program together for, we call the 100K Strong initiative. So I would say this, at the end, we very much indeed appreciate the support from Delaware and our commitment to do whatever we can, but it has to make business logical sense. The local government fully understands, they're fully supportive to that. It has to make business sense. But with that in mind, we're going to do everything we can to support the local community. And this is no different, frankly speaking, from the others we're doing in a different state. But obviously, we feel very warm, very welcomed in Delaware. That impressed us a lot. And our team just feels so much connected with Delaware. And hopefully, we will find more opportunity to work with the state. Now I feel you are representing the state.
Hi, I'm actually from the state of Delaware. I head up their international team, and I just want to say thank you. And the state of Delaware feels equally warm about you and the company, CGCC, and everybody else. So thank you.
So I'm glad I didn't say something wrong.
No, you're just perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And if there's any question, feel free to ask.
And that was a terrific way to start what is an important day for the China General Chamber of Commerce, and I'm delighted to be part of it. I'm Dan Rosen. I am the founding partner of the Rhodium Group, an economic research company that's been looking at the story of Chinese direct investment in the United States for about 6 or 7 years now as it's evolved. So we've sort of grown up together. And it's a real honor and pleasure to be asked to moderate a terrific panel here today to talk about the CGCC's new white paper on Chinese investment in the United States in 2015. I want to go ahead and start, and I'll probably finish as well by saying congratulations to CGCC for putting together what I think is a terrific contribution and really leaps and bounds forward in terms of what the Chinese business community can contribute to the discussion of what Chinese FDI means to the United States. Let me just start by setting the scene. Rhodium Group regularly updates our count of the numbers, how it's going. 2015 was a turbulent year in the world economy, in the Chinese economy, and lots of headwinds here in the United States as well. Nonetheless, for the full year, and we're just about to put these numbers out, 2015 will turn out to have been an absolute record year for Chinese direct investment in the U.S. We'll surpass the $16 billion mark in a single year. The mix of activity within that $16 billion of investment coming into my country is very broad. It's certainly not just about real estate, although there were some interesting real estate deals. There were significant energy sector deals, significant manufacturing deals, significant service sector deals. In fact, the spectrum of Chinese inflow and participation here reflects the breadth of the Chinese economy and the breadth of the American economy. Compared to some other major investors in the U.S., China has it all. It is a broad-based, continental-size economy that doesn't offer opportunities to us just in, or perhaps competition, per the topic of the day, in just one or two industries, but in the whole spectrum of 16 industries that we use to break down these flows when we look at it. Overwhelmingly private sector firms from China now making up the bulk of investment into the United States. The motivations of those firms is overwhelmingly clearly commercial in nature. These are companies looking to expand their business operations here on Main Street in the United States and Wall Street as well. It's not hard to discern what it is that's driving executives to learn from Nepean thought and figure out whether it makes sense to take a company's assets and use them in a high-risk market and high-return market such as the United States today. Also, we see a clear trend in 2015 of movement up into higher value-added activities and operations in the United States, which is good for China ultimately. It's a categorical imperative, I would say, for Chinese firms to find more of the margin, but it's not easy, by having a broader footprint in the U.S. economy. At the same time, both when we look backwards at 2015 and we look ahead at 2016, there are some things to give us pause. The first thing I'll note is that when we do the full year count on Chinese investment into the European Union, they have a record year as well. That's now north of $22 billion for last year, significantly above the trend line for the U.S. Good news stories on both continents, but in Europe, there are benefits far exceeding those that we're managing to see come onshore in the U.S. In the recent several years. There are macroeconomic risks now that are complicating the picture, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk about those a little bit with some of the panelists today. But as China works its way into its new normal, its next phase of economic growth, there are real challenges to the business models back at home, to border issues, including exchange rates, that raise new questions about what Chinese firms have to be able to do in order to successfully make the jump into the American market or any other market outside of the People's Republic. There are political risk considerations that are getting more acute over time as well. Some of those are cyclical. It's a political election year in the U.S., and hence there's all these rather crazy things being said about what Chinese investment means here. In the New Yorker last week, we had a story that made some rather questionable statements about how Chinese firms are performing here. Washington Post looking at individual employees at some Chinese companies and using that to write front-page stories about how China Inc. is doing in the U.S. These things are driven by the political season as much as anything else. But some of those political issues are not just short-term. The competition between the United States and China geopolitically is noted in one of the very first paragraphs of this year's white paper from CGCC. I thought that was bold and smart to go ahead and acknowledge that that's part of the context in which firms need to figure out how to manage their opportunities. And those are not going to go away after November 2016. Those issues are going to be part of our lives together for many years to come, I think, even in the best case scenarios. Those things are a given. What's not a given is whether we can effectively put all that into focus, make sense of it analytically, rationally, building trust with a broader and broader group of people with an interest in seeing this story evolve in the right direction. And that's where the white paper comes in. It's not just an American analytical conversation anymore. It's very much a conversation, a discussion, a dialogue with multiple parties, with a Chinese voice at the table that has something really new and fresh and important to say about what the experience of Chinese firms operating in the United States looks like presently. It's not just Nipin anymore. It's a much larger community of people that are bringing their perspectives to the table. Couldn't happen in a more important year. 2016, we have this growth in the flows which is so important. We also have the prospect of getting a big part, anyway, of a bilateral investment treaty done this year. In some ways, it would be in the next president's interest to see this American president go ahead and finish some of the heavy lifting in a bilateral investment treaty so that they don't have to take complete responsibility for coming to a conclusion on a negotiation early on in their presidency. Plenty to talk about, and I'm sure that many of you in the audience have things to bring to the conversation that I haven't even thought about yet. To do that, we have the good fortune of having 6 terrific panelists to share their perspectives with us. I'm only going to very, very briefly point out who they are so that we can preserve as much time for conversation as possible. But we have Xiaoyu Chang from ICBC in the United States. We have Zhang Jun from China Construction Bank. Mitchell Silk from the law firm Allen and Overy. We have 2 professors from Rutgers University, Li Ji and Liu Ming Wei, from the Law School and the School of Management, respectively. And last but not least, we have Alexandra Bryant from Jones Lang LaSalle, 4 years until the beginning of 2015, doing real estate in China, and now the past year looking at that sector in the United States. Many, if not all of them, I think, were involved in the drafting and preparation of the report and are in an ideal situation to share and offer some very well-considered views with us. I think we're going to go ahead and pretty much jump into a conversation, I hope. And I want to start off the conversation with the panel topic, Chinese direct investment in the United States, competitors or partners. I think Nipin has made a very compelling argument for how to think about that question. But there's more than one way to think about it, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to hear what the panelists think about this question. Both the question of which of those terms or both of them describe what Chinese investment in the United States means, and then a little more abstractly, whether Chinese and Americans have a different understanding of what competition even means. We sometimes see Chinese government statements about unhealthy competition that to the American ear doesn't necessarily look unhealthy. Minister Zhu noted in his opening remarks that there are different ways of thinking about that from the Chinese and the American perspective, and I know that we'll have plenty to say about it here on this panel. So with that, let me start with Xiaoyu Chang. Can you kick us off with your perspective on the top-level question of competition and partnership?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. So the first question is about the competition and the partnership. Well, from my experience in a new changing pattern in the future, I totally believe that the partnership will really the way toward the future. Why is, of course, currently we had this existed situation. It's both like Mr. Nipin's side, we had the partnership and the competition, of course. But the reason for me to looking at the future will become a little bit different because the first, the globalization has already driven different patterns for the competition. The competition was actually, well, how to see, not only exist or driven by the investment. We don't have a kind of the investment-driven competition. We had competitions everywhere, and we had competition not really necessary from our own peers, even cross industries. It's not really on our country, from different countries. Through this globalization of the industries and economic right now, so I believe the competition now is a kind of the menace to the economic. It was not necessarily really targeting some competitor, some peers right now. We all knew that the Kodak would not really, bankrupt because of the competition from Fujifilm. They lose because the change of the technology. They lose because there's a digital camera producer. We do not really need any new filmmaker anymore. So the change of the pattern, change of the globalization, I think was the first point I made. The competition exists everywhere. Why partnerships are more important right now? Because what your moderator has mentioned about the new normal. Now in China, so there's we call it a new normal economics. But actually, it's not only China is into this exercise into this new normal. It's world, it's economic, it became the new normal. What's the concept of new normal? We definitely have kind of lower growth rate in economic. We definitely have a kind of lower inflations. Yeah. But the new normal also created something. For me, I've seen this topic for partnership or the competition. Competition is normal, and partnership is new normal. Because nowadays, so many factors have been input into the competition and input into the restructuring of the economic. And during that restructuring of the whole economic pattern, the opportunity were created more through the partnership rather than the competition. So in the future, competition is a very narrow concept of the economic. So my point is, right, the partnership in the future not only exists between the companies, but also between the countries, between persons. And that's actually will drive the new normal economic toward the future. So to conclude, what I believe in the partnership and the competition is in the future, there will be some kind of partnership drive or partnership-driven competition rather than, we had the traditional competition like before. So partnership in the future will be the theme of the new economic era. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Xiao, we were talking earlier before the panel about this, different ways of thinking about the role of competition in our economy. And you pointed out to me that whereas the United States developed the Sherman Antitrust Act in the 1890s, right, back when the Waldorf Astoria was the only hotel in New York for all practical purposes, China only really in the past decade has started to systematize and mature its anti-monopoly law and all these kinds of regimes. And yet, even 100 years later, do you feel like the environment for Chinese financial institutions to compete on an equal footing in the United States is perfected, or do we still have some way to go in this industry to make sure there's a fully level playing field for Chinese financial institutions to operate here?
Well, ICBC, I think, was quite different from our Chinese peers over here. We've done 3 times of the M&A. That's also answered back to the first question about the competition. Nowadays, more of the Chinese investment to United States were through the merger and acquisition, not really through the original way, like, before we have more integration. The integrity, for example, like we had examples by Mr. Ni about the OEM factoring, those manufacturers trying to purchase their clients over here, right? So that's most of the Chinese investment we had last year. Right now, for now, is more for the financial investor. Like you have examples of here, the Celtel and many for those kind of those type of the investment to create more partnership. And for ICBC, for the banking industry, it's a little bit different from a financial investor, because the banking industry was actually they act like a media of the industries, or the like the media of the raising funds and the investment. And we actually act like the helping clients to create more opportunities, trying to fulfill their goal for their own strategy. So to answer a question about that, is we feel that the financial industry here in the United States, so it's very well developed, and compared to China, we still have the early stage financial market. And the recent, with all the news recently from China, that's the turbulence in the stock market, or we call the unhealthy competition through the the fundraising. Even though there's the oil regulator is doing really hard trying to regulate those new products, but given the current stage, I believe in Chinese market, it's not really like here in the United States. In the future, still some more effort need to be input into the financial market restructuring. That the important way and important role toward the new normal economic model, given the periods of Windows time. So the industry of here, financial industry here in the United States, for me, or the compared to global industries, I mean financial industries, was a little more different due to the for example, like the new regulation after the crisis, like the certain more stricter regulation to some different kind of the products and the services to the financial sectors. And to most of the financial institutions here, I think, especially for the big banks, there were not really a question, not only the how we feel it over here, how the components of here and the atmosphere of competition, but also the future of the finance industry. The finance industry in the future, right now, like we have this, I think the most important thing, not only here in the United States, but also globally, is trying to, the coordination between regulators, because also what I mentioned before, globalization of the industries or the economic was a part, actually drive the globalization of the financial institutions. And what we have here was still a lack of the global regulators coordination in that space. So that's quite a key in the future, that how we were here, we regulated highly by different regulators here in the United States, and we still need to regulate it by the Chinese regulators. So that the differences in the future that probably create some bias in the future, that what we need to think about is really seriously. And also the products and services will be quite complementary to each other, not only here in the United market to China, but also globally compare with what I mentioned, Europe. Thank you.
So understand the rules of the game and work with the rules. But when the rules themselves are evolving and changing in an industry, it makes it more challenging still. Zhang Jun, also from the finance sector, can you share with us some perspectives on partnership, competition?
Before I answer your question, let's think about the reason why the China investors invest in the United States. I think usually the main reasons include to acquire intelligence, acquire the technology, the brand, the distribution channel, as well as the customers. And usually, who can better combine such factors with the significant growth potential in China, I think can achieve more the good results. And let's think about the two cases just now we engage in. The first one is China Resources acquire the Fairchild semiconductor producer. And the reason is the Fairchild, the China is the largest manufacturing base for Fairchild. And Fairchild have some, I think, have some patents or intelligences, and the China Resources want to get. And another case is Qingdao Haier. Now they have successfully signed the memorandum with GE to acquire their appliance. At present, I think the main consideration is to combine just the factors, the 5 factors with the China market. But gradually, the competition will come. This is definitely. And in the coming 2 years, I think we can expect. I think we'll come to a peak for the outbound investment from China to the United States. But then gradually, I think we'll settle down to the stable pace. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Competition is not a dirty word in the United States, right? In fact, it's considered a virtue, absolutely. And the question is whether it happens within the rules. To make sure you stay there, apparently you find the most expensive lawyer in the room. I don't know, Mitchell, whether you're the most expensive lawyer in the room, but you're hopefully up there, I think, because you're certainly one of the most well-respected and renowned when it comes to bridging between China and the U.S. market. So from your perspective, this axis of competition and partnership, how do you think about that from a legal perspective?
Thanks a lot. It's, we kind of sit in an interesting position because unlike the sector experts here who are involved in a very focused slice of what's going on, we get a chance to look at really a sampling of what's going on in the market. And from the way that I see it, it's quite interesting. I quite agree with President Ni that it is competition and it is cooperation at the same time. That is definitely the best play. From the standpoint of whether it's competition or whether it's cooperation, I think it's really a function of a couple of variables, namely, for example, the type of the transaction or the structure of the transaction. If a client of ours is engaging in a competitive bid, say on a piece of property, then no doubt it will be a purely competitive play. What we see quite frequently with a lot of our clients that are coming into the States and looking at the property market, that one day they may be engaged in a competitive bid against a number of very active local players and investors. Ultimately, that bid will come to fruition and there will be one party that will take the bid. And very interestingly, virtually the next day, they may well be engaged in a joint venture development with the same party that was a competitor on another deal. So it really depends on the structure and the strategy of the investor that's coming in. I think one other interesting factor that impacts on competition versus cooperation is where the market is. Obviously, when the market is in a down phase and there are few opportunities, then that naturally leads to a lot of competition, a lot of pressure, given the limited availability of projects. On the other hand, when the market is in a frothy phase, as it was a couple of years ago, for example, on the property side, there was quite a bit free competition, free cooperation, in that there were just so many deals that were available. I would say that I also look at this issue from one other perspective, which is not only the macro perspective of what's going on in the market on the whole, of the Chinese coming into the U.S. market and interacting with US players, but also on the level of the Chinese participant versus itself. And what I do see is that in more than infrequent situations, the Chinese participant that has the comparative advantage is actually competing against itself. And the reason for that I see is that quite frequently the Chinese participant, particularly the newcomer, will think that America is actually China, that America can offer the same set of investment circumstances, can offer the same set of investment returns. Matters can be dealt with structurally and transactionally the same way that things are done in China, often overlooking the great challenges of the market here. So I have seen more than a few investors coming in for the real estate play in, say, Manhattan, looking for that home run of a 20% return, north of 20% return, when actually all one can command in the market is the low teens. And through that internal competition, I see a lot of transaction cost and energy being thrown away at the expense of the Chinese participant actually making headway in the market.
Okay, so when the market is on its way up or cooling off, it kind of changes the mix of the cooperation spirit versus the competition spirit one finds. What if the U.S. market is actually doing very strong, performing very strongly, and the Chinese market is seeing greater pressure in the mindset of Chinese executives? How does that play through this, this dynamic?
I mean, I actually see it as a great opportunity. At least that's what I've been banking on in terms of where I'm putting my marketing dollar and my marketing energy. I'm of the view that, that more constraint and more pressure domestically means that the Chinese executives, and excuse me for being presumptuous to those of you in the room that are sitting in this position, but I would have thought that actually brings more focus to the opportunities in the United States and elsewhere outside of China in an effort to diversify risk and to look at the opportunities that are available in the market globally, given pressures in China. Now, that is with one caveat. It could be that competition in China and pressures in China actually lead to distressed opportunities in one sector. So obviously one needs to take that into account as well.
Li Ji, a law professor in the United States, an American law professor, but a Chinese native. Let's stick with a legal perspective and go to you next and ask for you to offer some perspective, again, if you will, on this topic of partnership and competition.
Well, first I ought to give some data. According to the survey results, actually 64% of the survey respondents observed that their main competitors in the U.S. are American companies. So they are here, they want to explore the market, so inevitably they are going to meet some competitors. But on the other side, they cannot compete against the American companies alone. They need to rely on U.S. lawyers, accountants, consultants, and also they need to rely on their U.S. customers and suppliers. So if they have, out of every one U.S. competitor, they will have dozens of U.S. partners. So I think overall, Chinese investors in the U.S. will bring business for service providers and a lot of upstream and downstream U.S. companies. So overall, I think it is a mixture of cooperation and competition.
Does that mean that the other 36% in the survey believe that competitors from back home in China were their primary concern from a competitiveness perspective?
Some of them, actually about 30%, 20 to 30%, they came here because their Chinese customers moved to the U.S. So they have a niche market. They serve their Chinese customers. And for them, some of them actually compete with Chinese companies, their competitors back home who also follow the Chinese customers to the U.S. But overall, I think, because most of the Chinese investors want to explore the US market, so inevitably they will have some US competitors.
The first book I ever wrote was called Behind the Open Door, written in the mid-late 1990s about American investors in China. And just can't tell you how delighted I am to see Chinese researchers finding the same patterns in thinking among Chinese companies coming here as I found among American companies going to China 25 years ago. They were going because they were a mid-sized American company who worked for Motorola in Schaumburg, and Motorola said, get your butt to China, we need you to be with us over there too. Or because their competitors were going over to propose to do the same thing. And if they wanted to remain part of their partner's production chain, they needed to be there in the same market space as them. So all these same things. China's very normal, in other words, in what we're seeing in the data so far. We could keep going with partner versus competitor, but we've gotten so much out of that topic already. Maybe I can change gears just a little bit in turning to you, Mingwei. You're at the management school at Rutgers. I'm going to ask you a little bit more of a business strategy question I've had in mind. There have always been tremendous risks for a Chinese firm to make the jump to the US market. I remember a very senior Chinese official saying to a company, I think from Hunan, about 6 or 7 years ago, you can barely speak Mandarin. How do you think you're going to operate in the United States when you can't speak English? But there are lately even some new kinds of risks starting to confront firms. I'm thinking in particular, given the past month or so, exchange rate risks. Exchange rates plays a part in the way some people see these flows of Chinese investment to the United States. You can either specifically talk a little bit about those kind of financial risks that a company needs to face, or draw out any other elements of what are sort of the new pieces of the risk equation for a Chinese firm trying to make the jump to operate in a market like the United States.
Okay. About the exchange rate. So I think it's related with the Chinese firms' business strategy in terms of operating in the United States. So is your goal to achieve or acquire business assets, new technologies, or new management techniques, or your goal is to manufacture and produce in the U.S. or compete in the U.S. market? So what's your advantage? Do you have cost advantage or technological advantage? So if your competitive advantage is based on cost, so exchange rate may be very sensitive to your bottom line. So exchange rate change either on the China side or in the American side may affect your business operations because you have operations on both sides. On the other hand, if your strategy is to acquire assets or acquire new technology or management know-how, so that might be a different story. But in terms of acquiring assets, of course, you need to consider the cost in terms of renminbi, and exchange rate is important. But you have the long-term goal of achieving business success through technological innovation or management innovation. So exchange rate may not be that big issue for you. You would operate in the U.S. anyway. And I also want to talk about because this I think related with the competition and partnership. So a couple of days ago, New Yorker has an article on Chinese factories. It compares Japanese investment in the U.S. in 1980s with Chinese investment in the U.S. today. So in the 1980s, the American society were highly worried and concerned about the Japanese investment because Japanese companies brought new technologies, especially management techniques, the so-called lean production, that made Japanese cars more reliable and cheaper than American cars. So, but today, American companies and American societies don't have that much concern or worry about Chinese investment because the vast majority of Chinese companies still follow the cost strategy, trying to compete on low cost. So that may not be a long-term viable strategy in the American market. So the view of that article is that the Chinese factories still have a long way to go in the United States. So I agree with that view. But from the other perspective, I think it might be good for Chinese companies since American society and corporations don't really worry about you. And that means you may have more partnership opportunities, especially given the huge Chinese market and rapidly growing Chinese market. American products and brand and technologies have good reputation in Chinese market. So there are a lot of partnership opportunities for American companies as well as for Chinese companies to explore so that they could have a better strategy targeting the Chinese market. And, but in the long term, with the growth and development of Chinese companies, I think there might be more challenge or competition in the eye of American companies from the Chinese companies. And we already see in some industries like the solar panel industry, Chinese companies have significant advantages that could be really viewed as competitors of American companies. But again, so your business strategy is important for your operation here and important for your partnership and competition relationship with the local community.
This is a perfect example of why good research work is important to keep the political conversation and the broader public conversation healthy. It's very easy for people to start saying Chinese firms are to be feared, they're hollowing out the American technology base or this kind of thing, or that the pattern of their investment is only to curry favor with politicians, something I hear a lot as well. But when you've done the research, when you put together the data, the survey work for a white paper like this, it really does tell a very different story, doesn't it? I mean, when we put out our numbers on congressional districts, patterns of investment last year, what we found was that 19 out of the 20 largest investment congressional districts had no congressional committee chairman or leaders at all. It had nothing to do with a kind of political strategy. And in fact, much of the investment was going to some of the poorest counties in the country, not the most technologically advanced parts of the country. So it's a very broad picture, and there's a lot of value investing taking place. The only way to be confident about that, though, is to do the hard work of going through the survey research to put together a study like this. I'd like to ask the professors in particular, what was the hardest part of doing the white paper this year and getting this survey data put together? Did most of the Chinese firms you went out to agree to respond in a clear and useful way to your surveys? What was your experience of? Would you do it again?
Okay, so actually the survey was facilitated by CGCC. So we designed the survey and we closely followed the process, but it was really the CGCC people who spent most effort to getting the response from the Chinese companies. What I heard is that it was not easy, because firstly, the survey is very long, so that's our fault. We should be more considerate in the future. And secondly, some questions, there are some missing responses to some questions. So I think it's understandable because some companies may not want to share those information with anyone. So that actually poses challenge for us as researchers with missing responses that may reduce the validity of the statistical power. But overall, I think the CGCC members have cooperated with CGCC very well, and we got more than 120 responses. This is amazing, because usually, even in the United States, when you survey American companies, the survey response rate is usually low. So if you have 20%, that's great. So we are generally very satisfied about the response rate. And I think from the quality of the responses, the vast majority responses, I think they are reliable and have good quality.
Yeah, I would second all the comments. Really, CGCC staff did all the hard work, and yes, we learned a lot from this year and past years survey design, and also in general we are happy with the results. But I'm sure all the members here have completed the surveys diligently, and in the future, I just hope a higher response rate and less missing data. But overall, this is great. This is public goods we put out, and every Chinese investor will be able to benefit from the data and the knowledge drawn out of the data. And then we plan to continue to do that on an annual basis. So in the future, we'll have a clear picture of how Chinese investors are doing in the U.S., how they respond to U.S. institutions, and what's their plan, how they contribute and interact with the U.S. society. And today, with the survey data and Dan's data, they did a great job collecting objective data in different congressional districts. That's great data as well. So combining the two sets of data, you have a very good idea of about Chinese investment in the U.S. And we should thank CGCC for the hard work, and hope next year more members will contribute to the survey research. Thank you.
Transparency is still not intuitive to a lot of politicians or business people, but I think once the word gets around that it works and it actually shows up on the bottom line as a good strategy to take, you'll find your members will very much want to be part of this kind of survey process to shorten the time it takes to learn best practice, whether their colleagues share the same problems that they have. Real estate is often thought of as a kind of sector by itself. The potential to turn in really large numbers and very big deals. It's not necessarily very strategic, so it shouldn't have a lot of regulatory drag on it compared to some other industries and sectors. Alexandra, this is where you live and you work. How the story you're hearing, the rest of the panel's perspective, is this more or less similar to your perspective on Chinese FDI flows today? Or are there some particular nuances which come from doing some of the largest real estate transactions on the planet?
No, I would say the real estate space certainly echoes that. I mean, I would say one thing in particular, which I thought Mr. Pin really pointed on, was cooperation and really understanding what both sides of the table what both sides can really bring to the table. Real estate is obviously a very important sector in China, and it's a place where a lot of developers, insurance companies, even high net worths feel they understand very well. So when they come to the U.S., a lot of it is about being able to be part of that process. They don't want to just be passive money. If you compare them more to a Middle Eastern investor, for example, who will often come and just say, here's my capital, I know what you're going to invest in, let me know how it goes. Chinese groups, in my experience, want to be much more involved in the entire process. And I think it's as much about Chinese understanding how to operate in the U.S. as it is U.S. groups understanding what Chinese groups can actually bring to the table. If you take Amazon Prime, for example, I think everyone agrees that it's really changing the industrial sector in the U.S. and it's a revolutionary concept. Well, have any of those people ever shopped on Taobao? I think most people in the room who are familiar with Taobao will know that in actual fact, it's probably further along than Amazon Prime is. And maybe the US e-commerce world has something to learn from China and e-commerce. Another example was, take last year, I was working with a US developer who wanted to create a potential Chinese partnership, and the Chinese group was coming in and saying, look, we may not know the local New York market, but we've done more large-scale developments in China than you have in your entire history in the US, so perhaps we can create a partnership where we can both share ideas. And in the end, although it did not end up in a successful partnership, one interesting idea the Chinese group brought was we can work with this developer to actually source materials in China at a better cost because we have that network. So I think, echoing what everyone else said, in the real estate world, it is local, but it's also about understanding what the Chinese groups can really bring to the table in the U.S.
Art, you heard Mitch's concern that there's still some irrational expectations about returns on investments in places like New York City. Is that your experience as well? And do you see it evolving? Do you see it changing?
I think it's an education process. Absolutely, that has been my experience, especially, you take 18 months ago, I was actually still in China, but I was working with some Chinese groups to come to the U.S., and I think then, when they were very first assessing the market, it was going, we think that should achieve a 30% IRR, and you're telling me 15? No way, we're never going to look. But, you see now more Chinese groups have done more deals. They have representative offices here. They're doing more trips. So I think with time, they understand more what the local market is and what kind of returns you can expect, and they're adjusting their expectations as well.
So far, it looks like the first quarter 2016 could be a real success story. We have somewhere between $8 and $10 billion of new deals looking like they're likely to close during the quarter. We have GE that's been mentioned. We have Wanda and Legendary Studios. We have a number of information technology sector deals queued up for closing pretty soon as well. So the numbers look good, but at the same time, we've all put our fingers, and the white paper definitely puts its fingers on some of the regulatory concerns, political concerns hanging over these flows. The stakes are so high. At a time when U.S.-China relations are so complicated, this is really the brightest light of good news that's bringing the two economies together. So what are your perspectives on what the biggest risk factor here is? CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, is mentioned in the white paper as still giving us reason to be a little concerned about how it operates. But is that the biggest concern? Is it the regulatory approvals for inward investment that you think stand out as the bigger concerns? Or are we getting past that to more industry by industry considerations? And we can start anywhere here. Xiao, maybe you'd like to kick it off if you have some perspective on that, or whomever wants to take it on.
Sure. I think that's a very important question, actually. Now, China and the United States right now has made a really big step toward the blacklist way to make a better, more transparent the regulatory requirements, or the trying to make the bilateral investment more comfortable. So I'm quite agree with what Mr. Zhang said. In the future, I see that in the future, there should be much more investment both sides from and to United States and China bilaterally. But the CFIUS, such kind of the investigation will definitely one of the important concerns to most of the investors, because it created the uncertainty. So in the business world, the last thing you want to have for the investment is uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. So unless that investment will be too important to do, so most of the clients will shrink. And I had experience with some of our clients. The purpose of the investment would be purely from their own strategy of growth or the commercial purpose. But when they found that they may fall into the investigation from the surface, that would definitely shrink them back, make them back forward from the what they had original thought. So blacklist was the great way to make them those challenge, but the investigation that like CFIUS still need to we still need more information, more transparency with those type of the investigation. I think it's, that's my experience we actually got from most of the investors from China. Thank you.
Zhang Zhen, or anybody else that wants to take a crack at that question of what are the things we should be most concerned about this year, so that I don't get too excited about big numbers of success in this quarter. We have to remember there's a lot of constant work to be done to manage the risks that are involved with these flows.
So I second the comments, based on the survey, slightly more than 10% of Chinese investors actually, due to CFIUS concern, didn't engage in certain direct investments in the U.S. So remember, this survey results from a selection process. So the survey respondents experienced the investors in the U.S. from China already. So if a little more than 10% of them, due to CFIUS, didn't engage in certain investments, the percentage should be higher among Chinese investors contemplating of investing in the U.S. So overall, CFIUS is still a concern, and the process is not transparent. Fortunately, because of the Ross case that was just decided by the DC Circuit and eventually settled by Ross and CFIUS, I hope we will see more transparency in the process, and the U.S. government should really take this opportunity to improve the review process, put in more procedural elements in the review process. So foreign Chinese investors especially will know what they will get into when they start the CFIUS filing. But overall, on your question about the overall regulatory environment in China and the U.S., on the U.S. side, I think because of the Ross case, there will be more transparency in CFIUS review process. And other than that, there are sort of different regulatory requirements in different sectors. But overall, the U.S. regulatory environment is quite transparent. According to the survey, most Chinese investors are rather satisfied with the U.S. regulatory institutions. On the Chinese side, we all know that there's growing capital outflow from China, and that may cause some concern to the central government to tighten the review of FDI, outbound FDI. But I'm not that concerned. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that the Chinese central government is well aware that the market reform cannot be turned back, and the Chinese market has to be further opened, and FDI has to be encouraged if the Chinese economy is to continue to grow. So I'm not that worried about it. But, that's
Mitchell,
just my
Alan
personal-
Overy has quite a bit of expertise on renminbi internationalization and the use of the currency overseas, quite a bit on exchange rates. Do you share the confidence that beyond just very short-term volatility, balance of payments concerns in China are not going to lead to a kind of closing of the door on the outbound side that would be unfortunate in terms of the growth of this story?
Well,
I know you're not an economist, you're a lawyer, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Not at all. I mean, I share Professor Lee's cautious optimism. I would have thought that my gut feeling is that actually China is underrepresented in the inbound investment, and the insurance policy to protect the massive amount of macro PRC government investment in the U.S. is actually to encourage more investment at the corporate and micro level. So looking at it from a rather uneducated, on the economics front, lawyer's standpoint, I'm pretty bullish and encouraged, and just slightly frustrated that there's not more activity now in the market, even with the distress domestically. And as to the RMB issue, I mean, I think that this actually creates a ton of great opportunity for our colleagues at the banks, including Shihan Zhang and the others at ICBC, CCB, and the other 3 PRC banks in New York and elsewhere in the States, in that it not only creates opportunities for them to develop more and to expand out their hedging opportunities, which are pretty focused on a transactional basis, but going to your point on RMB internationalization, it provides all of their treasury folks to come up with more creative funding sources that can be now both RMB and US dollar, or even mixed related, so as to kind of deal with the potential exchange risks up front and on a more holistic basis.
Okay, well, I want to go ahead and go to the audience now then. I was trying to decide whether I was going to sneak one more of my own endless number of questions in. But please let me invite you to join me in adding to the conversation, asking anybody up here for their views. Please, the gentleman in the center and then the lady.
It's Marco Liu from the World Journal. I'd like to take the advantage of asking questions because there's so many issues concerned to our readers, and I'd like to have any members from the panel or from the chambers to answer a question like this. Okay. In your report, you indicate that recent change of the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act could exert significant impact on incoming Chinese investment in the U.S. market. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Those wording that, yeah, significant impact. What kind of impact? I check your table there, and you have difference from 10% to 15%, but how does it affect your business here in the States? And the second question, I think that not many...
Let me suggest we keep it to one, just because I'll circle back to you if I can, but I saw quite a few hands out there.
Okay.
And we only have like 9 minutes to go. Thank you very much. Good question. Anybody on the panel? Sure, Mitch, go ahead.
So as I understand the question, it's FIRPTA related, right? And how will that impact on incoming real estate investment? So 2 observations. First of all, the statistics that you see in the papers in front of you would have no relevance to this FIRPTA issue, in that the change in law that's referred to here is a new change, and the statistics relate to past periods. But to your question specifically, there was a change in FIRPTA to the extent that the changes make investment by foreigners, including Chinese investors, more complex in terms of structuring around FIRPTA, or make it more expensive because there will be more tax leakage because of the application of FIRPTA to the transaction. So then that will act as have a cooling effect on folks coming in. FIRPTA will impact on every Chinese real estate investment in the U.S. It does apply as the investors by definition are foreign, and unless you can structure around FIRPTA, and there are some very developed and accepted ways of doing that, then you'll be hit with a much more higher marginal tax on capital gains from that transaction. That's the generic answer. If you want the lawyer's answer, so we'll have to handle that over lunch and then for about an hour or 2 after that.
Well, if that was the generic answer, boy, the legal answer would really make me work hard. Okay. Please.
Hi, Bonnie Chow from Bloomberg News. My questions are for the 2 Chinese bankers, Mr. Xiao and Mr. Zhang, because a lot of attention these days are on the exchange rate and Chinese currency. So I wonder, how is the weakening yuan and the latest Chinese government's capital control measures affecting your business in U.S., and what's your forecast or outlook on the Chinese yuan? Because we've already got foreign investment bankers talking about 7 or even 7.6 by the end of the year. Thank you very much.
The depreciation of RMB will have both negative or positive impacts on my business, our bank business in the United States. And before the first half of 2014, we really have a very happy time. What is happy time? Since the business collaboration with our domestic branches, we brought a lot of easy money. The easy money means a lot of deals for arbitrage. The way how to arbitrage, make the arbitrage. But along with the tightening, I think, measurements taken by the Chinese regulators on so-called the structural trade finance, and it's more difficult for for Chinese enterprises, to take advantage of the arbitrage. But it's also a good opportunity, for my bank here. We from 2 years ago we transfer our business model, from the over rely on the arbitrage to the local business expansion. Just now, some people, are interested in the property, the real estate. Now we found a lot of Chinese investors purchase properties here, and usually at the beginning, they act as the limited partner. So I feel excited about the structure. Before I joined my New York branch, I worked in Hong Kong or Singapore, some places. But the property investment structure is different. Here, something like hedge fund. The sponsors, the real sponsors, are the GP. The investors, the big investors, maybe LP. I think they bring a lot of opportunities for us, and the M&A in the past, especially last year, I found the M&A, the pace, that is very good. Now we are involved in several deals here, and just as I was stated, we expect in the coming 2 years get to the peak. And we also expect the RMB will continue to depreciate in the coming years. But this is a good opportunity for currency hedge, I think, for Chinese investors. So all in all, I think the more positive impact to our bank's business here. Thank you.
Thank you. To be simple, the first is from my observation that weakness of Chinese RMB and currencies, how to see if I would like to use the different word instead of this strong dollar. So the RMB was not really comparatively to other currencies, was really in a low or the weakened position like other currencies like Euro or Japanese in this world. Basically, the dollar was way too strong right now. So that's the one thing, the first. The second point is the depreciation of the RMB, like Mr. Zhang said, will decrease the arbitrage needs on the market. So the other thing will increase the need of the hedge into the market, which will bring RMB more position, like more dynamic, more active, and more like no more usage of the settlement currency and also the investment. So the third was from our own experience with ICBC over here, that our funding and the usage of the currencies is basically still US dollar. So we're not really having a big impact upon the the fluctuation of the RMBs. So thank you.
We might have time for one more question before we need to break for lunch. Yes, the lady in blue.
Hello, I'm Haji Jiang with China Daily. So I want to ask a question to all the panelists, or especially the drafting team. Among all the data you have collected, is there anything that's surprising, anything stand out, or just as we expected?
There must have been something that was not expected, I hope.
I've been looking at the data for several months, so I'm trying to remember what...
Perhaps how much Dan Rosen liked it. I thought it was a great report.
Well, this may be surprising, but only from my academic perspective. So I look at how Chinese investors use U.S. legal service. And surprisingly, because from anecdotal reports, you hear that Chinese investors tend to save money. They tend to hire they try to avoid hiring expensive U.S. lawyers, but that turned out not to be true. The vast majority of Chinese investors actually rely heavily on U.S. legal service providers, U.S. lawyers, and when we will ask them, what they consider when they pick U.S. lawyers, they consider their practice experience, and not legal cost comes second, but there's a huge gap between the two. So they will pay a lot more to hire good U.S. lawyers. So that's, I guess, good news.
If I could just follow up, first of all, and thanks to Professor Lee, I think we're going to have to talk about your joining our marketing department after the program. But I did want to clarify on the report, and particularly the findings of the report. We focused on the panel a lot on the statistics. There are a number of substantive sections of the report where some of us actually wrote on a particular topic, like real estate, like banking, a sector, or issues. And from that standpoint, there were no surprises because we already knew what the issues were when we started drafting. But I would direct your attention to the various summaries of some of the sections, because there are some really challenging issues presented to Chinese investors that are trying to make their way in the U.S. In some sectors where the Chinese players are doing well, but are presented with some really heavy challenges. So, for example, you'll see in the section on banking that there is reference, for example, to the Chinese banks that are operating in New York being caught in a conflict of laws position where domestic Chinese law imposes one requirement, domestic U.S. law imposes another requirement, and the New York branch of the Chinese bank is caught right smack in the middle, presenting an inherent disadvantage on that branch and presenting some very challenging legal and foreign policy issues. And it's that and a number of other issues that are brought out in the paper that I think are very worthy of all of you having a look at.
I have want to add some quick comments to this. So to my surprise, and also in contrast to the existing literature on international business and management, is that the localization of management of Chinese companies in the U.S. is quite high. The degree is quite high. So that's a surprise. I think there may be at least two reasons. Firstly, as is because Chinese companies, most of them are aware of the dramatic difference between China and the U.S., especially sometimes the tensions between China and the U.S. So in the literature, it's called liability of foreigners. So Chinese companies may have a high awareness of that, and therefore try their best to follow local rules and local management styles. The other reason is that different from American companies investing in China or in other countries, the American companies or Western companies, they typically have the advanced management techniques, and they want to standardize their management practices worldwide. But for Chinese companies, many of them want to learn the cutting-edge management techniques, and many Chinese management practices are not efficient or couldn't fit well external environment, so that's why they want to localize their management. But anyway, this is in contrast to existing literature on Western companies operating in the world.
Just about out of time. Is there anybody who has any closing thought they absolutely must bring to the room? If not, then let me just offer three quick finishing up observations. You know, thinking about localization and the importance of the local impact of your investments here, just as important as it was for American companies' local impact in China over the past 35 years, right? Employment, jobs, contribution to communities. Ben Eckersley on our team, who's with me here today over there, and is the kind of guy who actually does all the counting up that makes it possible for research like this or research like ours to be done, assures me that 2016 is the year that Chinese invested employment in the United States goes over the 100,000 mark. By the time the next president is elected, we will be able to say that over 100,000 Americans have jobs where they're getting paychecks from Chinese invested firms in the United States. So that'll be a new 100K strong to complement the American students that Nipeen is part of sending from Delaware to the People's Republic. Secondly, I would encourage you this. I've spent my whole life and career in the think tank world and the research world. today is a wonderful day. You'll celebrate the release of this white paper, but it's just the first in what should be a 365-day program of rolling out this white paper. This is not the end of the process, it's the beginning. Now you have something really important to bring to the table, to bring to the conversation. I encourage everybody who is involved in it and everybody who helps support it to keep using it throughout the year and using it to demonstrate just how significant and important the Chinese contribution to the conversation is. And lastly, I would point out that its impact is not just here in the United States. A report like this is going to have at least as much impact in China as it does in the U.S. Chinese firms that have misunderstood the American opportunity are going to look at this and say, you know, it doesn't sound like the hardest place in the world to make money. It's different, it's challenging, there's cultural things we have to learn along the way, but there are enough examples of firms figuring out how to do that and move their enterprises to a whole new level of global success and participation. So I know the Chinese version is already there and available. I bet there'll be as many downloads as of that as there will be of the English language contribution. With that, let me congratulate Candace and CGCC, Chairman Chu, and everybody who was involved in making this possible. Wishing you my congratulations on your success for this. Wish everybody a happy New Year, 新年快乐, 恭喜发财 and all that. And Candace, unless there's any other preliminaries, I guess we move to lunch. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the panel.